Welcome. My name's Kevin, and this is the Bible Artist Podcast, and this is the Bible verse discussion in which we are creating or imagining what it would be like to adapt the story of David's time in the wilderness as the head of a band of outlaws and people who are down on their luck as King Saul is pursuing him. So that's a biblical story. It's covered in 1 Samuel, several chapters in there. So we've been going through the story and imagining how we would adapt that into a ongoing TV show, which we are kind of tentatively calling David and the Outlaws. And so over the past few weeks, we came up with kind of a big picture outline for our first season, which is 10 episodes. And then we've been going through a few episodes, each podcast episode, and we've been discussing kind of the basic outline of those episodes, the different events that are happening, things like that. We've also kind of done episodes on characters and other things involved in putting together a show. Eventually, we may do like a fantasy casting round. We may get some AI art going on. I've done just little bits and pieces here and there for the thumbnails. But anyway, I've been going on a little too long. Let me introduce my co-hosts. So I've got my friend Victor and my friend Chad. You guys introduce yourselves.
I guess I'll go
Chad,
first. I'm Victor.
Victor, go for it.
I'm Victor D. Giovanni. I'm a video producer by trade and a filmmaker and novelist by passion. And if you're interested in reading a in-progress fantasy novel, Christian fantasy novel, you can go to vicdigital.substack.com. Episode 6 goes up this weekend.
Yeah, and it's really been a lot of fun to read Vic's novel. It's kind of got like a reverse Narnia concept, so it's really a lot of fun. So definitely check that out. Chad, go ahead.
Could that be like a whole series of things, like reverse Lord of the Rings? Or does that even make any sense, or no?
It's kind of reverse Lord of the Rings a little bit too, kind of.
I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe that just makes sense with Narnia having like its world that people get transported in and out of. But anyways, so if he's Victor, then that makes me Chad. And I'm a chaplain. And one other thing I do just on the side is work on adult Bible study curriculum. So Bible stuff.
Yeah, and explain who you are too, Kevin. You didn't tell us who you are and what you've got going on.
Who are you?
Yeah, so I'm Kevin. I run the Bible Artist blog and podcast and things like that. So the Bible Artist is a website that focuses on adaptations of biblical stories into television, movies. Sometimes I'll do books or other mediums as well. And especially I focus on The Chosen. That's the biggest Bible adaptation in the game right now. Although there are several exciting new projects that are up and coming. The Chosen has announced several, like a Moses one and a Joseph one and a kids Chosen Adventures series. There may be a couple others that I missed there. And then there's also like House of David, which I'm going to be really interested to watch House of David because it'll be covering some of the same territories as we are, but probably from a different kind of perspective and approach. So maybe once that finally comes out, we can do like a watch party or discussion where we do some comparison and talk about their decisions because we've kind of been thinking through some of those same concepts. Anyway, House of David is one that's going to be coming up in maybe a year or so, and Testament is like a alternate history New Testament or Book of Acts. So lots of exciting content that is going to be coming out soon. And I cover a lot of it in like kind of reviews, analysis, interviews, stuff like that. So thank you guys for...
If you like any kind of cross-section of the Bible and entertainment, thebibleartist.com, that's what you want to go see. It's got incredible articles and a lot of insight. Really fascinating stuff.
Thanks, Victor. Yeah, that's actually how me and Victor met. We just kind of discussed stuff about The Chosen when he came across my website. Chad and we've known each other since like 5th grade, maybe. So yeah, we've got kind of a longer standing creative partnership. But,
Yeah, I met Kevin when he played a mean saxophone.
and by mean, he means, yeah, not so great. Yeah.
Oh, and real quick, just while we're talking about stuff, Chad and Kevin have a game that's out right now on, I guess, Amazon's, where you're probably pointing people, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's called Make It. It's a fun game about creating inventions, or I guess that's what. Well, you tell us your quick pitch.
Yeah, you basically you create invention ideas, you pitch them to other players, and decide who has the best invention. So, yeah, that's an idea that Chad and I had going for like over a decade, and then we finally kind of pushed it out to the market. Yeah, so
we all like making stuff, so that's why we're interested in doing this kind of stuff. So.
Yep. Okay, but let's go on to the actual meat of our conversation. So, like I said, in earlier conversations, we put together a season outline. So this is the outline. I'm not going to go over it in detail because we've done that before. I guess I can do real quick. So it starts with kind of the starting event is David going on the run from Saul. He briefly gets help from the priest Sanab, and Saul kind of wipes out that city, the city of the priests. And so some of our main characters, as a result of that, kind of the last surviving priest, Abiathar, who's forced to go on the run when Saul wipes out that city. We've also got, he's still labeled here as the slave. We've got a former kind of debt slave who runs away from slavery. We've given him the name Jehoiada, which is a biblical name that I took. So he and Abiathar eventually find their way to David's band of outlaws and join them. And so they're kind of our point of view characters. So unlike a lot of kind of movies and shows that have tried to approach David, David is not our protagonist. He is like a very important character in our show, but he functions more like, if you think of like The Chosen, Jonathan Rumy's Jesus, he's like a central character, but he's not the point of view character. Our point of view characters are like Matthew and Simon Peter, Mary Magdalene. We're seeing Jesus through their eyes. And so in the same way, in David and the Outlaws, we're seeing David through the eyes of Jehoiada, the former slave, Abiathar, the priest who's on the run. We've got some other David's men that come into our show. There's also a servant in the household of Saul, Benaiah, who is Jehoiada's son, and Jonathan. Doeg is like Saul's like right hand axe man, and then we've also got a character known as the Hittite, who will eventually be Uriah the Hittite, who's several chapters after our story will be over. David eventually, when he has been king around for a while, he eventually betrays Uriah, kills him, sleeps with his wife. It's a very famous story. And so we're kind of creating a backstory for Uriah, which will make all those events all the more tragic. And it's kind of been fun to try to kind of expand that character. And actually the episodes that we're getting into right now they're going to have little bits and pieces that are kind of like fun in that regard, like foreshadowing kind of what's going to happen to Uriah. Anyway, so first half of our season is kind of David and his men. They're kind of constantly on the run from Saul. Then kind of the midpoint of the season, Saul, he's chasing after David's men. He goes into a cave. He doesn't know that David and his men are in the cave. David has the chance to kill Saul, and David, very importantly, decides to not kill Saul. And so that's a real turning point for our show, because after that event, we're going to see a lot of David's men frustrated with David, frustrated with his decision to not kill their enemy, to not take out this person who is trying to kill them, for Abiathar to not kill the person who wiped out Abiathar's entire family, his entire city. So David's men very understandably are frustrated with David because of that decision. And we'll see that a lot in episode 6, the first episode we'll be covering today. But it'll kind of be an ongoing thing that David and his men are kind of, there's growing tension between them over kind of how to approach Saul, whether they should be kind of taking matters into their own hands through violence, through political alliances, trying to find different strategies to eventually topple Saul, or whether they should just be trusting in Yahweh to give David the kingship in his own timing. So that'll be kind of one of the overriding kind of dimensions of the second half of our season. Before we kind of move on, Victor, Chad, any thoughts or any things that you want to comment on or things that I missed?
I think we're good.
Yeah, just that, like, when you put it out there, it's like, oh, what should they do? Should they use like these other like political means, or or should they trust in Yahweh? And it's like, when you just say it like that, it's like, well, duh, they should trust in God. Like those knuckleheads, they want to use these other means. But like, the nice thing about like putting it into a story and this kind of visual adaptation is that, like, with how we're approaching it, is that like we're really made to feel like the real pull of like why we might use other means, and why like there really is a tension, and it's one that we can relate to, because that really is something that plays out in our own lives. It's like there are all sorts of ways in which I don't know. Anyways, so that's I feel like we're just going to be trying to put that on display, like why that really is a tension, and it's not, even if in some cases it's, we know what we ought to do, how we ought to trust God, but there are real things that are, pulling us away from that, or might cause us to go another direction. And in other cases, we don't always know what it looks like to trust Yahweh. Anyways, sorry, I just want to throw that out there. It's like, that's when you just say it, it's like, oh yeah, duh, they need to trust God, but like we're going to feel the tension through the characters.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because that'll be like an important rubric for us to be thinking through as we go through these episodes. Like, are we really, are we creating that tension and making it feel like, really making the viewer feel pulled, like, and making it like not just like, oh, obviously you should be going with David, or so we want to be making them kind of feel that pull between, like, should they be trusting Yahweh, or should they be doing the practical thing, the thing that seems like it just makes sense. Yeah,
I mean, just talking about it, I'm like, how do you not take Saul out? I mean, I'm feeling that frustration, because he's right there. You had him.
Yep.
It's like, what is, you can just, it's like we have all those decisions in our own lives where it just feels like the obvious, fleshly thing to do is right in front of us, and it makes sense in the world, but we know that that's not what God would want us to do. So it's just that's the exact same kind of tension and battle we all have individually.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's dig into kind of the specifics of it. So episode 6. So this is the episode right after kind of that turning point episode, right after David, he had Saul, he could have killed him, and he doesn't. And so episode 6 is actually going to open like right after the end of episode 5. So end of episode 5, after David has spared Saul, isn't aware that he even got spared. It all happened in the darkness. He was totally unaware of David being there. David, he briefly goes back to his men. He kind of like keeps them from going and trying to take out Saul themselves. And then he goes out of the cave, exposes himself, because Saul could potentially, when he sees that David is there, he could send in his men and have David killed. But David, he gives this really brilliant speech, kind of like calling Saul out basically for having pursued him unjustly, and like making Saul aware of the fact that he had Saul kind of at his fingertips, and he did not kill him. And one of the other things that we'll be exploring in this episode is the fact that this speech, it's apparently given like very publicly. And so Saul's men all apparently hear this speech going on. All of David's men probably hear it going on. And they also hear Saul at the end of the speech. Saul basically says, like, you're more righteous than I am, and I know that God's going to make you king. So he basically, like, even though he is still calling himself king, he's like essentially given up the game by saying that, you know, he recognizes that God is on David's side. And so that's going to be one of the things that we're exploring in this episode is, you know, how's that going to impact Saul's men? And on the flip side, you know, as we discussed, how are David's men going to be processing the fact that David didn't take that kill shot when he had the chance? So, like always, our episode will start with a cold open. And so for this one, I thought that we could, so the Saul getting his cloak torn or cut on the corner, that's an intentional kind of allusion or callback to an earlier point in the book of Samuel, where Saul tears Samuel's cloak, and because he's trying to like basically force Samuel to go back with him and try to make everything okay in front of the leaders of Israel. Like he's trying to get Samuel to say, you know, Saul's okay, even though he, you know, I got mad at him publicly and confronted him. Yahweh's on his side. But, you know, Samuel is refusing to do that. And Saul like tears Samuel's cloak. And in response, Samuel says to Saul, God is going to tear the kingdom out of your hands and give it to another person. And so we're going to kind of replay or flash back to that scene. And then we'll see kind of Saul looking at, in the present, Saul looking at his torn cloak, kind of remembering that moment, because he's kind of seeing what just happened to him as like God kind of like reminding him of that scene and of the fact that he's going to have his kingdom torn out of his hands. So he's going to kind of be moping a little bit. And does that make sense? And then from there, we'll see Saul's army kind of leaving from the cave where you know, David's men were. Abiathar and Jehoiada are going to kind of be like watching them, probably with several of David's men kind of just watching Saul's army moving out. And we'll have Abiathar and Jehoiada kind of talking to each other, and, you know, they're kind of processing what just happened and David's decision to not kill Saul. And they'll start to kind of begin expressing some of their doubts in David and his decision to do that. Meanwhile, we'll have so the Hittite who will become Uriah. He'll be part of Saul's army that is kind of leaving the field kind of in shame after, you know, all the stuff that just happened with their leader. And the Hittite is going to overhear Doeg and Abner. Abner is one of Saul's generals. They're going to kind of be worrying about, like, basically, like, how do we keep the army together? How do we keep people motivated when Saul just said, like, David is going to be king, like, right in front of everybody? Like, how are we going to, like, restore confidence in Saul after this embarrassing moment? And then Jonathan is going to show up. He's going to bring news that Samuel has died, which is an event that happens right after this, after the story of David and Saul in the cave. And Jonathan will kind of like see that his father is really like just despondent and frustrated, and he'll kind of try to urge him to lead and urge him to, you know, to try to like lead the people in the midst of this great loss. And they'll decide to head out to the funeral of Samuel. Meanwhile, Abiathar, he's going to be urging David, you know, Saul's men. They haven't gotten too far yet. Like, we could potentially like try to do like a an attack on them while they're kind of in disarray. But David's like not going to be interested in that. He's still going to be pushing back and against the efforts to try to attack Saul and take matters into their own hands. And when Abiathar is like clearly like God, he was trying to deliver Saul into your hands. Why would you disobey what God was trying to call you to do? David will actually challenge Abiathar to use the Urim and Thummim, like to see what God actually says they should have done. And like Abiathar, he's kind of caught, and he's going to refuse to. He'll come up with some sort of reason for why he doesn't want to use the Urim and Thummim, but it's pretty clear that he realizes that David's probably going to win the argument, and David will order an evacuation of the cave, because like even though Saul's left, you never know, like he could change his mind. Saul's very moody, and he's constantly kind of changing whether he wants to attack David or not. So that's Act 1. Yeah. Do you guys have any thoughts, questions?
Who all's with David and Abiathar? Is anyone else witnessing this, or is it just the two of them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking that conversation being a more private one between the two of them.
So like the rest of his group, are they aware that he's wanting to use the Urim and Thummim? I mean, are they aware when he does, or is that something that's only as a need to know kind of thing?
I think it, like in this specific case, I think it's like a personal, like because he doesn't actually end up using it. Maybe like in other times, like when they actually do end up using it, they might like catch on that that Abiathar is using it. But since like Abiathar doesn't actually end up using it, and it's just like kind of a challenge that David makes to him, I think they probably aren't like aware of that challenge. Yeah. Any other thoughts or ideas on opening?
Not really. It's like Abner. I just did a little bit of reading on him. He's how much of his overall? Because I know he ends up like putting one of Saul's sons in power, or at least are you gonna present him as important, or with future stuff, or?
Yeah, I'm basically putting kind of him. At this point, I'm kind of imagining Doeg is almost like internal affairs, or like maybe like kind of the head of like looking at, I don't know,
CIA
like
kind of.
Yeah, CIA, something like that. Whereas Abner is the head of the army, so especially like kind of external battles, but also occasionally just providing force for whatever needs to get done. So Abner's pretty powerful. Yeah, later on in the story, he's a very important character. So he made sense as like another person for Doeg to kind of be scheming with, as he's like trying to figure out what to do, because Saul is kind of in this despondent state where he can't really, like Doeg needs to. And this is something in this episode that I'm trying to do, is I'm going to try to create kind of a parallel between what Saul's men are doing and what David's men are doing, in terms of like both men, or both groups, have just been surprised by what their leaders did, and both groups are probably like frustrated with what their leaders did, and they're trying to kind of like, without like removing, like pulling a coup or whatever they're trying to like kind of shape their leaders and like get them to do what they think is right, and get them to do what they would like to do. So Abner and Doeg are kind of the head of that effort within the camp of Saul, and then we'll see kind of other stuff happening in the camp of David as the episode goes. Chad, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, would it make sense for there to be an uncomfy kind of parallel between what Doeg Doeg and Abner are talking about, and it's Abiathar and Jehoiada, like that they're kind of both contemplating similar kinds of
Mhm.
means for keeping their respective, leader in power.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely be getting that parallel a lot. It'll even come out even more in Act 2. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And as we're doing that, it kind of helps us see that like it's not really, this isn't a battle between like the good guys and like the bad guys. Like, there's sinfulness to go all around, and yet there are differences between the two camps, and a lot of that has to do with like the two different leaders. And even though David is imperfect, what makes him a different leader who's able to overcome kind of that push from within his. So yeah, that's part of like what we're getting to see in this episode. So yeah, Act 2, we'll have kind of the outlaws. They've left the caves and they've gone kind of into the desert wilderness, and we'll have them like thirsty, hungry, like tired, kind of an Exodus sort of feel, and they may even be like discussing that kind of topic. And I thought it would be a good chance for Jehoiada to, like, someone might like encourage him to just trust God to provide. And I was thinking, like, if Jehoiada heard that, he would actually probably get like really offended or frustrated by that kind of like comment, because like if you look back on the backstory for him that we've created as someone who did the faithful thing by serving in God's armies, but then like lost his farm, lost his kid, like had like all these horrible things happen to him, like he doesn't feel like, he looks back on that and he's like, where was God providing in the midst of all the terrible things that happened to me? So why should I believe that God's going to provide right now? So like he'll kind of be like wrestling with why is David like trusting that Yahweh is going to provide, and Yahweh is going to come through? Like, I haven't seen that in my own life. And he might be having that conversation with like Abishai or someone else in David's camp. Meanwhile, we'll see like Abiathar. He'll also be feeling a lot of frustration. And we'll introduce, well, we may have introduced him like earlier in the season. Probably if we were actually writing the specific scripts and stuff, I'd want to like sneak his character in a bit earlier. But this is where Amasa will be kind of playing more of a important role. So Amasa, he's from the family of David. He's probably like a cousin. He's also a cousin of Joab and Abishai. So and within our show, he'll kind of be like an antagonist within the camp of David. So as Abiathar is kind of expressing his frustrations about kind of what's happened, we'll have Amasa like kind of listening to him and empathizing and kind of like riling him up a little bit as a means of kind of like trying to kind of generate some pushback against David's direction among the outlaws. And eventually he'll invite Abiathar to like a secret meeting where they're kind of gonna discuss the direction that David is taking them, and he'll even kind of hint that like that maybe they can come up with a way to kill Saul, or to like force David's hand so that David has to take Saul on. Meanwhile, we'll have Saul mourning for Samuel at his funeral, and as kind of they're in the situation where they're remembering Samuel, we may get like a flashback at some point. Doeg and Abner they'll be reminded of kind of why people turned from Samuel to Saul in the like to begin with, and it's basically because like when it came to like when there were wars and things like that, the people wanted a king who would go out before them and fight their battles for them. So they're going to realize, like, if we want to keep Saul in power, if we want to kind of restore people's confidence in Saul, then we need like a war to be able to kind of like show Saul's value and show that he can still deliver the goods. And so they're going to realize, like, we probably need to start some fighting with the Philistines to try to kind of shore up Saul's power. And again, we'll have the Hittite kind of overhearing, like potentially at this point, like kind of spying on them, because he's like curious about kind of what they're putting together and a little like leery of them. So that'll kind of be the midpoint, is them kind of coming up with this plan to start a war with the Philistines to keep Saul in power. Any thoughts or questions on kind of that Act 2?
Yeah, I think for the flashback, you almost kind of have to show Saul and Samuel at a good point. Otherwise, it'll feel weird that Saul is mourning Samuel, because all we've seen is them potentially at odds up to this point.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and yes, that was one thing I was thinking, is you'd want to give a scene, because Samuel and Saul's relationship is like a complicated thing where Samuel can like be really hard on Saul, but he can also be like very like sympathetic to him, or at least like encouraging him. Yeah, there are a couple of potential scenes in Samuel where we could have show like Samuel like encouraging Saul and kind of pushing him on to do his duty or whatever that we might have him kind of reflecting on.
But you also have the parallel from just Saul, or the people wanting a king in the first place. Yeah, so that kind of goes right along with them wanting to go to war. It's like the people were constantly wanting something that wasn't necessarily how God wanted it.
Yep. Yeah, the people are wanting, again, this is one of those kind of mega themes for our show, like the tension between like wanting like a man of strength who has, military prowess, or, cunning, or kind of those things that are pragmatically useful, versus wanting a man of faith who, they're prioritizing obedience to Yahweh and submitting to his will. And the people, when they call for a king, the reason that Samuel is so frustrated about it is because it's not, in theory, like the Torah has like provision for establishing a king, but it's supposed to be the man of faith model, and instead the people are really wanting like the man of strength model of kingship, which is what the Gentiles have. So yeah, we'll definitely kind of want to be like showing how that attitude is still prevalent, and that's why Doeg and Abner think that starting a war is the way to kind of keep Saul in power. Chad,
you could probably do a bunch. We could probably do a bunch of little flashbacks.
Yeah,
we like the Samuel flashback episode where we kind of see why he's important in the first place.
Yep. Yeah, so I think you'd get like a bunch of like, this would be a good episode to cover some of that territory earlier in the book of Samuel that we haven't been able to cover kind of in the main storyline, but we may want to just show on screen to give context and also kind of paint this picture of what the people want, and Saul's relationship to Samuel and all that stuff.
Kevin, not to put you on the spot, but how can you give like a flesh out a little bit that conversation between Doeg and Abner? What are some of the things you feel like they would be saying? What would they be saying to one another?
Yeah, so basically, like Doeg would be, so in the previous act, we've established that they're worried about like, what are we going to do? Like Saul has basically just made it clear to people that Yahweh is not on their side. Like they've kind of had processed kind of the initial problem, but they haven't come up with a potential solution. And so then Act 2 I'm thinking of them kind of like watching Saul maybe like leading a part of the morning ritual or whatever, where they're kind of like seeing him. Maybe even Saul like mentions some sort of memory of Samuel, and how like even when like some people didn't believe in Saul, Samuel still trusted him and put him in charge to lead the people. And Saul could even kind of have like he could be kind of puffing himself up, or kind of have an incorrect memory of his relationship with Samuel and his relationship with the people. But so as they're kind of like watching Saul address the crowd, I'm picturing kind of them, Doeg and Abner, kind of like standing next to each other in like a larger crowd, and kind of like having like a side conversation, like kind of like turning and maybe not like totally whispering, but like kind of confiding in each other and being like, this is like, this is kind of like what drew people to Saul to begin with. Like this, they, if Saul like kind of mentions how the people, through like the reason that the people moved from Samuel to him is so that he could lead them in battle, but Samuel was a great and godly man. Either Doeg or Abner could be like, that's it. Like, that's why, that's what's gonna draw the people back to Saul. And the other one would be like, what are you talking about? And we'll say Doeg be like, we need a war to show people why they need Saul. We need to show how he is able to provide strength and leadership, and win the people's battles in a way that right now David and his men are living out in the desert. They're not able to do anything for anybody. Now is like the time to show what Saul is able to offer to the people or whatever. So I don't know. That's a real general kind of description of it. Does that help at all, or do you have more kind of
what are
specifics
their kind of motivations? I mean, is it just simply like their own, like, so they can stay in their own kind of role and power, or is it also security? Like, it can't just be about like, we just really care about Saul, like what his movement, I don't know, stands for. Like, what would you say that like is motivating them? Is it just that simple, that it's just like it's just safest for them, or
Well, yeah, and basically like they assume like if David takes control, like then there's no, he's not gonna want anything to do with us. Like obviously, like we need to keep our man on the throne so that we can keep our positions and our power. Yeah, that's basically their motivation. It's not like super complex or
okay.
Yeah, with Abner, you could maybe have a little bit of like, he believes that Saul is still the guy.
That's true. Yeah, we could
Doeg
try to
is going to be a lot
them.
more.
Yeah, Doeg is like kind of purely pragmatic, whereas like Abner might still have like a little bit of like commitment or something like that.
So for Uriah, is this going to be any sort of like a turning point for him? Is he going to be able to like hear this conversation and juxtapose that to what he actually knows is going on with David, and say, okay, what's happening with Saul doesn't sound right, or something's off? Is that going to be any kind of thing for him?
Perfect transition there, because that's in Act 3. We have Uriah going to warn Benaiah, but like through him, he's basically telling him to go talk to Jonathan about this, and that would be like a context for him to basically kind of articulate like like, yeah, like he saw kind of everything happen in episode 5. You know, he saw David, and we've given him, you know, several points where, you know, he's seen David and David's men act in like an honorable way, and he's seen like Saul act in a dishonorable and shameful way, and now he's like hearing Doeg and Abner plotting a war, not for any like sort of like noble or even like pragmatic reason from the perspective of the people, but just so that they can keep their man in power, even though like they're no longer like fully confident that God is on board with him. And so basically the Hittite, he'll kind of be like warning Benaiah, like, you know, I think this is going to be bad for everybody. But it'll be kind of like an interesting moment for I was thinking that Benaiah, he could have a line somewhere along the line of he could ask the Hittite, like, isn't war good for you? Meaning like, you know, you're a mercenary, like more battle and stuff, potentially more spoils, more money, whatever. But there's kind of like a two, like double sense to that phrase where, yes, the war would be good for him, like financially, but he might respond like, I'm not so sure anymore, because the war, like more war, isn't necessarily good for him, like from at a, you know, kind of moral, spiritual level, and he's like starting to kind of wrestle with like, do I really want to be associated with these people? He's still not quite at the point where he's going to break with them, and actually he's going to kind of be forced to stick with them in this episode, but he's moving in the direction of wanting to break away from them. And so yeah, the Hittite, he'll warn Benaiah to talk to Jonathan, see if Jonathan can kind of head this thing off. But then he'll, like, as he kind of leaves the conversation with Benaiah, Doeg will kind of show up. We might not know exactly how much Doeg overheard, but we get the sense that Doeg is aware that like that the Hittite, you know, has kind of been trying to help out Jonathan against his plans. And eventually we'll come back to that. Abiathar, like back in the camp of David, we'll have Abiathar kind of bringing Jehoiada along with him to the secret meeting that he got invited to. But as he's, I was thinking he might actually kind of have a conversation with David that makes him start to kind of like question whether he should be going, but he's kind of already committed to go. And Jehoiada is still kind of all in on going to this meeting. Oh yeah. So then back with Saul's kingdom, Abner. So Doeg will bring the Hittite to Abner, and Abner will basically kind of pressure him into leading his planned like attack on the Philistines. It's meant to kind of get kind of war and battle started again. Even though the Hittite doesn't want to, like they'll kind of be pressuring him into doing it. And then back with David and his men, Amasa will kind of be talking to a group of kind of people, some of David's men that are frustrated with his decision. And his plan for them is basically like, let's kind of like provoke Saul, like do something that forces Saul to come after David, so that David has to respond and fight back against Saul. And he can't kind of keep skirting the issue, basically. But as he's giving his plan or whatever to the group, we'll have David actually like show up to this meeting. He somehow like discovered it, and he'll kind of like interrupt it, and we'll kind of cut away before he actually kind of has his confrontation with Amasa. So yeah, that's Act 3. Chad, did you have something? Oh. Does that all make sense? Cool. I can keep going to Act 4 then. So final act, Jonathan, when he hears that or sees that kind of the Hittite is getting sent off on a mission, he'll try to prevent it. He'll kind of protest to Abner, but he'll kind of just get shut down in his effort to stop it. We'll have David. Oh, and the reason he'll Jonathan, he's kind of lost a bit of power within Saul's camp because of earlier, Saul getting mad at him for consorting with David and aiding David. So Abner can kind of ignore Jonathan's protests at this point. Meanwhile, David will have him kind of giving kind of a speech or kind of a response to Amasa, basically kind of him calling them to trust him and his leadership and trust Yahweh. He'll be kind of persuasive and able to win a lot of them back, and just trust that Yahweh will provide in the wilderness, just as he has for their ancestors. But Jehoiada, while most of the other people are convinced or at least kind of assuaged by David's speech, it'll be clear that Jehoiada is not won over. Back with Saul's camp, we'll have Jonathan kind of warning the Hittite to not trust Abner during as they go out to fight against the Philistines. So just kind of a foreshadowing that there's going to be some negative stuff there. I'm thinking with that, you could kind of foreshadow not only next episode, but also the stuff that's going to happen with the Hittite and Abner. It'll have some parallels to what's going to happen to Uriah under David. So we'll get a little bit more of that next episode. And then the episode will end with Abiathar discovering that Jehoiada has fled. And next episode's going to kind of cover what Jehoiada is doing instead of trusting David. So yeah. Thoughts on that final act or just the episode in general?
What is what do Saul's men think of Jonathan? What's his how do they view him? Do they view him as suspicious because they know he's at least was a friend of David? Is he, how is he? How much danger do we as an audience think that Jonathan is in? Is he is he in enemy territory, or does he pass himself off as being a loyal Saul person?
Kind of in between those extremes. So he's not in danger necessarily, but they no longer look to him as having definite authority from his father, because he's kind of proven himself as untrustworthy, or he's betrayed the king before. So that's why they view him as potentially a collaborator with David, and so they're kind of slow to listen to him. And Abner especially kind of views him as at the very least an obstruction, if not a potential threat to Saul's reign or whatever. Yeah.
How does Saul view Jonathan? Does Saul have any kind of doubt about Jonathan?
Yeah. So what I'm thinking for this season is, at this point, Saul is still pretty frustrated with Jonathan, although he may kind of early on in the episode, when Jonathan brings news of Samuel's death, he may still be able to kind of comfort his father in that vulnerable moment. But when it comes to actual decision making, Saul is still pretty suspicious of Jonathan. And by kind of the end of this 3-episode arc, Jonathan will kind of get a chance to redeem himself a little bit in Saul's eyes. And so there will be a little bit of mending in their relationship as things go along. Because eventually, like we need to get to the point where Saul and Samuel or Saul and Jonathan are going to war against the Philistines together, and yeah, I don't know.
Are we going to have like Jonathan? Is he going to be like trying to redeem his dad or trying to save his dad? Is that going to be a little bit of his arc?
Yeah. So basically, in this story, Jonathan and Benaiah are kind of trying to prevent Abner and Doeg from starting a war, because they realize like that's not, like, Saul kind of needs peace for a moment so he can like sit and like think about what just happened, and like, you know, have the possibility or the opportunity to repent more fully. Like maybe Saul takes some time now and reflects. Maybe he eventually does step down from the throne and hand it over to David. That could kind of be their best case scenario. But they realize, like, if Abner and Doeg kind of drive Saul back into another war, which kind of feeds Saul's ego, then he's gonna completely forget about all the stuff that just happened, and yeah, kind of the potential spiritual progress of that moment will be lost.
I'm just thinking of the episode as a whole. So it's kind of like like you have these two different camps that are grappling with like, well, what do we do now after the climactic episode before? And I'm just looking over. It's like this episode seems to highlight the character of Jehoiada, and maybe, would you say Abner in the other camp, or what would you say as far as the other camp?
So I would say this episode is going to be a lot more like, we're going to get a lot of like all of our characters, because it's less like plot driven and there's like a lot more kind of conversation. So like we'll get a lot of like Abiathar, Jehoiada, and yeah, back in the like Saul's camp, Doeg, Abner, yeah, a little bit of like the Hittite. So yeah, we're getting like a lot of kind of character moments and kind of reflection. So it's a little slower episode from like a event standpoint, but
it's kind of like moving the pieces on the chessboard, getting them ready to go for the next batch.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was like. Okay, there's not a lot of action in this episode. It's a lot of conversations. I think this might only happen twice, but there's like kind of like at least two times where like someone overhears someone, which is kind of like, you don't want to have too much of that, because it's just kind of like but I don't think there's necessarily too much. But like, I feel like what would make it interesting, and this kind of comes back to an earlier comment I made, and is that like, as much as you can see a parallel between like conversations that are happening in these two different camps, which are theoretically like on two different sides, and you know, we might be tempted to think one's the good guys and the other one's the bad guys, but it's like, if they're both kind of like having eerily, like if there are people in both camps that have eerily similar kind of ideas, like one is saying we should go to war and the other one's saying we should kill Saul, so they're both kind of resort, in both camps there's this temptation to resort to violence, and as much as that can like be played up, I guess that would keep it from just feeling just like moving pieces on the chessboard, as if this is just like a transitional episode or something. So that would be like my concern, is that like very little action, which is fine, but like when there's little action, you don't just want it to be, and I'm not saying this is how you've written it, but like yeah, I guess then if I was to turn this to a question, how would you keep it from just feeling like, oh, we're just getting things set up and situated for the things that are to come? Like, what do you find, what's a feature of this episode that you feel like makes it cohesive and like compelling in its own right?
Well, I think it's what you kind of pointed to there. So like, in terms of like the editing, I think would be really important on this episode to like be like cutting back and forth between these different camps and like creating lines and like a lot of like parallels so that we're getting this message that like we're seeing how both camps are actually responding in similar ways to this event that's happened. And so it's kind of like like fleshing out kind of what it would have been like to follow these two men.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that wasn't like a challenge to what you put out, but it's like I'm just curious how you do that. And maybe to go with the chessboard analogy, it's like you see that like, oh, they're both making like the same moves.
Yeah.
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 Well, it's kind of neat too, because you kind of also have somebody trying to give Saul good advice. There is some, if he'd have just taken this good advice, things could have gone better. But yet he's going to choose the harsher angle.
Yeah,
so
and
they both have good and bad advice.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, one of the kind of takeaways of this is kind of how we see David and Saul responding to kind of the machinations that are happening within their camp. So like Saul is kind of absent. He's even though he's like the man of strength, he is very like passive, and his men are basically able to take control by the end of the episode and send things in the direction that they want. And he's kind of too caught up in his own what he's going through to do much about it. Whereas we see David by the end kind of stepping up to he's able to perceive kind of what's going on within his camp. He's got kind of the that perception, and he's able to respond to it in a way that's winsome, and he's able to win back over a lot of his men, as opposed to having his men kind of ride over him. And the whole like what's the like there go my men and I must follow them, for I'm their leader kind of perspective. Does that make sense? Or yeah, cool.
I guess I have like one. I almost don't want to bring it up, but it's also like
no, go for it.
It's one of those things where even if it's almost like weird how you've sketched this out, because and I'm not gonna go into specifics just because we don't have to, but it's like it's hard not to see like in our own context in America, like in our political moment, how it's like this kind of in a number of ways like speaks to it. And and it's almost like you could unwittingly like people be making like political commentary, but it's really just you telling the biblical story and people making those connections, I guess, for themselves. So Kevin, do you see that as like I don't know, what do you think of that like layer of meaning? Is that just something where it's like you just kind of like leave it to people to like, like they can apply this and where did Victor go?
I think he just had to take a minute. Yeah.
Or would you also, in like knowing that you're writing this for an audience today, would you be thinking about like not like, oh, do I want people to like, apply this into their like politics, but like, would you be thinking of how like people might do that, even if that's not your intention? Does that make sense? My question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't control how people are going to apply your story. Like, if you think of like kind of the greatest stories that are out there, like think of like Lord of the Rings, it gets like used and applied by people across the political spectrum. You've got like really hardcore, right-wing people that are really into aspects of the Lord of the Rings. You also have like hardcore environmentalists, like left-wing people who hold on to other aspects. So I feel like in a story that's big enough, people will find applicability. And I don't think like there's sometimes it's like appropriate to do like social commentary and like draw like kind of more direct parallels. But but I wasn't necessarily like trying to. I've also like I definitely agree with you. Like there are interesting parallels or instances of potential applicability in the David story, but I wouldn't necessarily like try to make that like too explicit, or like I wouldn't want to be like too heavy-handed with it, because I feel like people will find that for themselves, and I don't necessarily think that the role of like the creator is to like force an interpretation, or like really like with this kind of story to like be too pressure kind of people to come to a certain conclusion about its applicability to the modern day. Yeah, but I like that. I'm glad that you kind of brought that up, because I do think that applicability is definitely in there. Yeah.
Well, and even like it's one of those things where I didn't think that like, oh, that's what he's doing, but it's like, and maybe I'm just a little too personally like tuned in politically, and I mean it is like election season, but it's like even just me as an example, like I saw things that like I didn't think that like you were intentional about like, oh, he was trying to tease out a political meaning for the audience today, but I was like, this might just be like part of a good story where it's like there are things that are going to be applicable, and
I'm sure like there's a dimension of like we're in the same moment, and I'm thinking about these things myself, and so it it probably like seeps into there just kind of like through like subconsciously, or just as like a because like as we're creating stories, we create kind of with our whole person, and so we like I'm also not trying to like compartmentalize my thoughts about politics or things like that, but I'm not like trying to put them in there in like a very like specific way, I guess.
Well, you're not shying away from it either. You're not avoiding things that could be taken two different ways, just because they might be.
And
it's a good topic to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one reason I feel like the Book of Samuel, Book of Kings, like I wish that these books were discussed and preached on in more depth in the church, is because I feel like they do have a lot to offer us as far as like our kind of like political theology, and how we think about things like power and force, and other things like that. So I definitely like would love people to be thinking through some of the stuff that's involved with them. Cool. Well, let's keep on to episode 7. So yeah, this is kind of very closely tied to the last episode. So it's called The Rock of Division. Cold open. We're gonna have another kind of flashback one. So we'll have the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer. If you guys remember, there's the story where they go out, and the Philistines are kind of at the top of this cliffside, and Jonathan, he's talking to his armor bearer, and he's like, we're going to go up to them, and we'll say, well, if they challenge us and they say, come on up and like fight us, then we know that God is with us, and we're going to go do it. And if they say, we're going to come down to you, then we know that God is not with something along those lines. And the armor bearer is basically like, I'm with you, heart and soul, like I'm going to stick with you. And so it's like a really beautiful picture of like faithfulness, and also kind of like trusting in God's providence and stuff like that. So we'll have, we'll like see that scene, but then we'll see that Jonathan is kind of like regaling some of the men with the story, and the armor bearer, who will be like older now, will kind of turn to Benaiah on the side and basically be like, that's going to be you pretty soon, sticking by our master through thick and thin, and being faithful to him. So we'll kind of set up kind of Benaiah's like desire to be that kind of faithful servant, and partner for Jonathan. And that will kind of come out even more in Act 1. We'll have Benaiah. He'll kind of be potentially like maybe Jonathan will like be training, but he'll kind of sense that Benaiah is not fully present or something's distracted him, and he'll talk to Benaiah, and Benaiah will kind of express how he's feeling torn between. He just saw his father is part of David's band. He just discovered that for the first time back in episode 5. So he's feeling torn between like wanting to go to his father and sticking and being faithful with Jonathan. Meanwhile, we'll have Jehoiada arriving in Gibeah, like where Saul is. He's like planning basically on going after Saul and trying to get his son. So he'll just kind of be arriving and getting set up for his plan. And then David, he'll also be feeling torn. He'll be feeling torn. So after, in the aftermath of Abiathar discovering that Jehoiada has left the camp, they'll realize that Jehoiada is probably going to try to go after his father or go after Saul. And so on the one hand, David will want to go save Jehoiada, because they all think like if Jehoiada tries to do this on his own, like there's not much chance that he's going to be able to escape alive. So David will kind of have that impulse to go after, like, leave the 99 and go after the one who has strayed. But on the other hand, like the camp will have various different kind of pragmatic needs. They've been kind of going through the wilderness, and so they're low on supplies. He's just had kind of this confrontation with Amasa, and he's going to want to be keeping tabs on him. They're going to Joab, David's second in command, is going to point out, like, we need to be kind of reestablishing like a new base. We need to be building alliances with people in the area. We have like kind of all these practical needs that need to get taken care of. We can't go running off just because one lone man has decided to take matters into his own hands, basically. And then we'll have the Hittite. Abner will be kind of outlining his plan for the attack on the Philistines, and the Hittite has a sense that like this is a bad plan. He's basically going to be sent in with some men into a situation where he knows that like if things go south, like we'll kind of be like sitting ducks, and the Philistines will catch us and probably kill us all. Meanwhile, like Abner will be safe with his army or whatever. So the Hittite will feel kind of torn between like wanting to just like ditch out and leave this all behind versus like sticking with the men that he's been kind of put in charge of leading in this plan that Abner is pitching to the army. So yeah, we got kind of several characters who are feeling torn between a couple different directions in Act 1. Yeah, do you guys have thoughts? Can one of you like monologue or something? Like I need to grab some water from my throat quick.
What you thinking, Chad?
I just saw the word torn 3 times, and I was like, that's either intentional or an accident. That sounds like it's intentional. These characters that are each torn. Just between two different courses.
It's like how is this going to be presented? It's like for Benaiah, is he going to be talking to somebody about that? How do we see his options? And in each of these cases, what is the choice presented to the person to show that they are indeed being torn between two different things.
Yeah, and then we were just talking
Keep
about.
going, Chad.
Yeah, we were just talking about.
I've been listening.
Each of these, as you said, each of these characters are torn, and Victor was wondering about like, well, how are we going to see that them kind of negotiating between these two different courses? Like, is it through conversation or through some other means? And then I'm wondering, this is what I was about to say. I'm just wondering, like, are there supposed to be parallels between like the like each character having kind of two different ways to go? Like, are they supposed to like kind of be neatly kind of parallel with these other characters, or is it just, or is maybe it's not that neat?
Yeah, so I didn't make this.
Oh no!
Oh, we have to keep monologuing. Might just be me here. Hopefully, Kevin. Oh, here we go.
I think I'm here.
Sorry,
There's
guys.
Kevin. There's Victor.
I know exactly what happened there.
It was just me for a second with nothing.
You were torn between two different things to do.
So as far as kind of the parallels between the choices, I feel like each character has like one option, which to varying degrees is related to kind of like faithfulness or like kind of sticking beside other people. So like Benaiah, kind of being faithful and sticking with Jonathan, David kind of wanting to stick with Jehoiada, even though Jehoiada has kind of betrayed him to some degree. And then the Hittite wanting to potentially stick with these men that he's been put in charge of leading, even though, it's a bad situation. So basically the characters are choosing between kind of sticking beside people, faithfulness, versus kind of doing the pragmatic thing, or the thing that they that seems like it kind of makes sense from a personal standpoint. And then Victor, I think you'd asked about how Benaiah, how that choice kind of comes out for him. So I think he would actually talk about it explicitly with Jonathan, because I don't think Jonathan is the kind of person who is going to like force Benaiah to stay. But at this point, they don't know where David and his men are. So like, even if Benaiah like decided to go like join his father, he wouldn't know where to go. So it's not like an immediately pressing choice. But Jonathan could even communicate like, like I didn't know that your father was out there, and that there's this potential for you to be reunited with him. So Jonathan could almost like be encouraging him to go with his father, and to do that. But Benaiah could actually express like reservation, because he's just kind of had this conversation with the armor bearer, and he's kind of been thinking like almost like God is like calling him to stick by Jonathan and serve him. And he feels like that's kind of like his purpose that he's been called to. And so he could kind of be discussing that with Jonathan as kind of a mentor figure. Yeah, Chad.
You know how David seems to have like respect for the fact that Saul is the Lord's anointed.
Mm-hmm.
Does that extend to Benaiah? Is that like, is his faithfulness to Jonathan? Is he also like faithful to Saul because at this time he's the Lord's anointed? Like, does that factor in at all as far as thinking of that? I think we kind of pegged him as a character that like maybe more than any other character represents like good means and good ends.
Yeah. I mean, that could be part of what he envisioned. Like I'm sticking, I'm here to be with you, as you, Jonathan, are trying to steer Saul like in the right direction and keep the kingdom going kind of in the right direction, while there are kind of all these malign forces who are trying to steer Saul in the wrong direction. So yeah, like he wants to be serving. He doesn't have like a naive view of Saul as like being automatically right, but he wants to stick by Jonathan in trying to kind of maintain or like they haven't yet like kind of fully given up on Saul as the Lord's anointed.
Because okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like, faithfulness will be rewarded is almost like an underlying theme kind of going on. So that's, and with the armor bearer things, like, I stuck with
exactly
Jonathan, and it paid off, or not paid off, but it was the right thing to do. And that could be the same thing for Benaiah here. It's like, well, even though, or Jonathan telling me that it's okay for me to go is almost like that's proof that Jonathan's the right guy to stick with.
Yeah,
because he's making a choice that is a good choice. He's a good guy.
It's kind of like the choice to be faithful to Jonathan is like being faithful to like a higher calling, maybe. Even though it would also be a very good thing to be reunited with his father. And that like feels like we were talking earlier about like I don't know. Yeah, people can feel that tension. Like there's something. It's easy to say like, oh, of course you do like the higher calling kind of thing, the thing that's being faithful to God. But it's like, but if it comes at the expense of like, being reunited with your father and then kind of joining up forces with, David. But yeah, how would I guess you explain? This is where I can't remember like the chronology, but it's like, what is? Yeah, Saul, I guess, is the Lord's anointed, but has David, is he also at this point, or like, and is that public, and is it like?
They've both been anointed. So David is anointed like really early on,
like way back.
Yeah. So like in some weird way, they're like both the Lord's anointed. It's not clear like how public that is. You get the sense that probably in David's camp, the people are aware that like, the Lord has anointed David, and like the reason that they're congregating around him is because they think that he's going to be the next king. But it's not clear outside of David's camp, within like kind of the broader kingdom of Israel, how many people know that David has received this. Because like when Samuel anoints David, it's kind of a covert affair where he like comes into Bethlehem and the people are kind of like worried about it. And a lot of it seems like he's kind of like trying to keep things hush.
And even at this point in like the biblical story, like it's David's still referring to Saul as the Lord's anointed, right? Yeah. So I guess that's part of what makes it kind of, David, who himself knows he has been anointed by the Lord, is also still, anyways, okay, we don't have to get deep in the weeds here. I was just
that's a good question. And then kind of so David will be kind of mulling over his either or decision with kind of probably like a small council of his leaders. So probably like Joab and then Abiathar, who will be kind of our point of view on the conversation. They'll be kind of deciding like, what should we be doing? And so we'll get to hear like a few different perspectives from some of the other leaders. Like Joab will kind of probably be the main one pushing David to focus on like, you just got challenged for your leadership from Amasa. Like we can't be going off on, this like little side quest. Like we need to focus on the stuff that really matters. Whereas like Abiathar might be kind of more pushing for going after Jehoiada, because he'll feel a little bit of guilt for being the one who introduced Jehoiada to Amasa and like brought him to this secret meeting and kind of set him off to begin with. And then, yeah, the Hittite, he may just kind of have I don't know exactly who he'll kind of be processing with, but maybe like one of his men or whatever. Yeah. So then Act 2, we'll have Jehoiada. So we'll have Saul kind of giving in open court. So we know that like back in during ancient Israel, the king would like be out in public judging different like cases that would be brought to him and stuff like that. So Jehoiada will kind of like kind of get in line basically to try to get an audience with the king, pretending like he's got like a grievance that he wants to have the king judge. But we'll see that he's kind of like got a knife and stuff, and maybe he's gonna try to stab the king. But before he gets up to that point in line, Jonathan will interrupt, and he'll question the king whether why the king has allowed Doeg and Jonathan to kind of manipulate him and send out the king's soldiers for battle without like the king's express permission or whatever. And initially, like Saul will be like surprised by he won't have like known that Doeg and Abner sent out a force to attack the Philistines, but ultimately he's gonna Saul will kind of side with Doeg and Abner. We'll see kind of that dynamic I was talking about, where Saul's still frustrated with Jonathan, still kind of distrustful of him, so he's willing to kind of defer to his senior leaders over his son, because he sees his son as like still being on like David's side and not on his side, and he'll still kind of resent that. And then see the Hittite, his attack, maybe it kind of starts off okay, but eventually it'll go south in exactly kind of the way that he was fearing that it would. And Abner will not provide like reinforcements, so he'll kind of the Hittite and the men that small kind of group of men that he's been given will be kind of left kind of to fend for themselves, and they'll end up having to flee from the Philistines. And then we'll kind of have the midpoint be Jehoiada. After Jonathan leaves from before Saul, Jehoiada will decide, instead of like staying in line, to go follow Jonathan, because he'll also see that his son is accompanying Jonathan, but he'll attack Jonathan, but get stopped by Benaiah, because Jehoiada just assumes that Jonathan is kind of like one with Saul and has been keeping his son, and Benaiah will have to kind of explain like, no, father, he's a faithful man, like trying to stop Jehoiada from acting rashly. This won't the attack won't happen like right in front of Saul or anything. This will be like down some alley or something. But then as they're kind of discussing, Saul's guards will see that he's there with a knife or whatever. Like maybe he's got it against Jonathan. He's maybe like just about to pull it back. But then Saul's guards see him, and so they assume that Jehoiada has been sent to assassinate Jonathan, and they give chase. And Jonathan will send Benaiah with Jehoiada, giving him his blessing to go free. Yeah. Thoughts on Act 2?
I like it. very emotional ending to it.
How that first bit where Jehoiada is to strike the king as he judges, how far does he get? Like, is that a like long and big scene, and then it's like he's about to do it, and then Jonathan interrupts? Like, is that how it is, or?
I think it's probably not like a super long scene, but like it's just kind of a like building tension. We see that he's there. We see that he's got the knife. Yeah, maybe he's like next in line, so he's like just about to get his chance to get close enough to attack, and then Jonathan interrupts. That's kind of the feel that I was thinking.
Oh, okay. Is it another option? Could it be that he actually like starts presenting his case? And
so I was
like,
actually thinking of having him earlier when he arrives in town. I didn't go into detail on this, but I was thinking like maybe he like goes to like as he's like coming in, he gets like questioned about his business or whatever, and so he could like say that he's come to present his case before the king, and kind of say like, my son was seized unjustly, and I'm coming, I'm seeking justice from Saul or something. He could speak in kind of a way where we're like, we could set like a double meaning of like, he could just be asking Saul to step in and give justice, but he in his mind is actually thinking like, I'm gonna seek justice like on Saul for his role in this.
Yeah.
You could almost do something like how David, like when was that Nathan? That's
Nathan,
who was saying like presenting the story.
Yep.
And then it turns out it's you.
That's kind of what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool. Okay, maybe it would be good for him to like start to talk.
It's a generic story. It's like here's a hypothetical story. What would you do? Oh, that's a horrible thing. That person should be.
I like that.
Be killed.
Yeah. So that's what you're thinking, Chad?
Well, that actually is the same thing I thought of. I thought of David and Nathan. Thou art the man. So, but it wouldn't get quite to that point.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it would mean for Saul to actually be like, oh yeah, you should definitely like get like, I don't know Saul's character enough to know if, like what he would actually, if he would get it or not. But that would be kind of, I don't know, and maybe that doesn't make sense for this particular scene to be highlighted so much. But that would be one cool way to do it, is to kind of, as you said, have a double meaning, and or it could be something even where it's like Saul basically gives permission to be like, oh yeah, like we need to execute, that man, and then so the idea would be then that like. That Jehoiada.
No, I really love that. Like that's the more that you guys are talking about that. Like I feel like that makes the scene like so much more.
There's a way to do it.
Actually, that even like is an opportunity to give Saul's character, like embrace his roundness a little more. That like he isn't just some guy that would just be like, oh yeah, like like he would, like if he kind of like David, that like thou art the man, like he has some recognition in hearing a story of like this is a bad thing, and yet it's something he himself has done, so there's that kind of inner contradiction, and Saul could have that too. So,
and you could also show the different ways that David and Saul react. David completely took ownership of what he did. Saul could do the opposite and just kind of not feel that that's him.
Yeah, and eventually, if we have him like get that full case, then we could kind of bring that back as the episode continues, and he realizes that even if Jehoiada doesn't like he doesn't like get to give Saul the like thou art the man moment, as like the act progresses, he could realize like that basically he is the man or whatever, but then he doesn't choose to repent of that. So but I feel like you could probably like even take David's line. He might say something like, like the man who did this deserves to die or something.
Oh yeah.
And you could totally just like copy and paste it and then have a cool like hyperlink. So that's awesome. So yeah, Act 3, we pick up. Doeg will take some men to pursue after Jehoiada and Benaiah when he hears what happened. Jehoiada and Benaiah would flee, and maybe like Jehoiada gets injured in some way along the way. So it looks like he's not going to be able to keep up, and he wants Benaiah to just like keep going and get to safety or whatever. But Benaiah, he's, again, we've got kind of that faithfulness theme. He won't leave his father. He's going to stick with him. And he's, even though it might mean getting caught. Meanwhile, the Hittite will have him offer to the men that he has been leading, who will have them be Israelites. He'll basically offer to kind of lead the Philistines away from them in the wrong direction or whatever, and have them kind of go in the other direction so that they can escape. Again, kind of the faithfulness bit, even though they're separating ways, but he's kind of exercising kind of spiritual faithfulness to them. And then the outlaws will arrive kind of just as Doeg and his men are kind of catching up to Jehoiada and Benaiah. And the outlaws, they've got more men. They'll be able to kind of like help. They might even be able to like put Jehoiada on like a mule or just like kind of carry him along or whatever faster than Benaiah would be able to do. And so they're able to not fully get away, but like at least like in that moment, they're not going to get caught. But Doeg will get permission from Saul to pursue after them further. Now that he sees that David is with Jehoiada, and he would probably pitch this. He would probably like claim to Saul, like, see, like this man was sent by David to assassinate you or whatever, and this is our chance. Like we need to go after and go get him, and we might have Jonathan respond and kind of like try to plead to his father, like, you promised not to go kill David. Like you said that you weren't going to go after him anymore. So Saul will kind of have this moment where he's deciding like to be faithful to his word or kind of go after David. And he gives Doeg permission to do the chase. Jeff?
In that conversation, would Jonathan try to give David the benefit of the doubt that he didn't send Jehoiada?
Yeah.
Because of what David had, like, David could have killed you and he didn't. And so like, does it really, like, is there going to be some sort of defense of David,
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and he's even probably heard enough from Jehoiada to put together the gist of
sure.
Why he was here. So he'll like be like, that's not what happened. He'll like be like saying like, this is a total misunderstanding. Like the man was just trying to get his son back. But Doeg will kind of just try to like shut him out and be like, he's just trying to like, he's with them. He doesn't even he'll kind of play to Saul's like distrust of Jonathan, and get Saul to ignore Jonathan's much more sound advice. And then Act 4, so David and the men that he's brought, it won't be like his entire group. He's like left Joab.
Actually, wait, sorry, can we pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
So wait, so Doeg does get Saul to pursue though?
Yes.
So could it just be that like, even though he's heard Jonathan out, it might not be that he pursues David because he actually is like, he believes that like, oh, David really like did send this guy. Could it just be that like Doeg is just saying, whether David sent the guy or not, like he's like the source of your, like he's your obstacle to power, I guess. Like, even if, does that make sense?
I
Like,
think,
does Saul come to the place where he's like, I'm gonna pursue because he might have like sent someone after me, or like is he? Yeah,
so
why does he
I
decide to
don't want
pursue even in
Saul
the
there
face of?
quite yet, but what Doeg might point out is like, regardless of whatever Jehoiada's motivation was, like he's a criminal, like he came with violent intent, like he deserves justice for raising a sword against the son of the Lord's anointed, regardless of why he did it or whatever. And David is now like abetting a criminal, and all of,
Mhm.
most of David's men are criminals.
Yeah,
like,
okay, yeah.
so like, it doesn't matter whatever Jonathan, however Jonathan wants to dress it up or whatever. Like, these are a bunch of criminals and they need to be brought to justice or whatever.
Yeah, or it's like it doesn't even necessarily matter what David's his intentions are.
Yeah.
Like, look at the company he keeps, and like look
Yeah.
what's he's basically the source of like he's the source of like the threat against Saul remaining in power, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, sorry, I just wanted to get that square before.
At this point,
that's good.
does Saul have religious advisors? Who's advising him religiously? Could they be giving him false or wrong doctrine to make him feel that he is in the right?
That's a good question. I don't have that. Like, it may be like, if as like, if we were writing out the entire script, that we might need that kind of character. I don't have it like in the outline, just because it doesn't, those figures haven't played a big role so far. Although I think eventually I would want to, like, that might be like a season 2 kind of thing, because I think in season 2 we might get into Saul wiping out the mediums and the witches and stuff, as like a setup, because then at the end he ends up going to the last witch, who is still out there, so that he could kind of like, in season 2 he could kind of trying to like rehabilitate his kind of like theological or religious face before the people, and we could kind of introduce a religious advisor in season 2. But I feel like it might be a little too much to add in here for season 1. Anyway, so for Act 4, David and the men that are with him, they're gonna kind of be fleeing to like a large hill or rock, with a canyon down the middle of it, and they'll have to decide, like, should we stand here and fight, because eventually Saul and his men are going to catch up to us, and like this canyon, it's a pretty good like choke point where we could stand against Saul's forces for a while and fight them off, or should we just try to keep fleeing or whatever, and would have probably like Abishai be the voice of like, we should stand and fight and like kill these dogs or whatever, whereas like Benaiah, we might have him be the one who pushes like David to keep fleeing and trust that like Yahweh will provide. And I was thinking that there could be like kind of at the top of the cliffside, like a large like rock that's kind of overhanging or somehow like could easily be knocked down. And so Benaiah gets like a moment kind of in parallel to the opening where the armor bearer and Jonathan are scaling the cliffside. Benaiah scales up the cliff to like knock down some sort of large rock that so that as David's men pass through the canyon, this rock would kind of block Saul's men from pursuing after them. Does that sequence make sense? How I'm describing it? Yeah. Okay. So then Saul's men, they reach there after Benaiah has kind of cut off their pursuit of David, but the larger kind of rock structure or hill isn't too big, and so Saul still wants to go after David and just kind of circle around and keep chasing him. And so this is actually a biblical story. I'm elaborating it a lot, but the idea of like Saul kind of trying to chase David around a large rock is in the source material. But before they can catch David and his men, messenger will arrive from Abner. So because the attack on the Philistines went so badly, the Philistines are actually counterattacking, and as a result of that, they need Saul and his men to come immediately to head off the Philistine forces. And so Doeg will be pushing Saul to keep after David or whatever, but Saul will have kind of no choice. Like if they don't leave now, like the Philistines will sweep in and cause all kinds of havoc. And so, like, kind of ironically, the thing that the attack on the Philistines, which Abner and Doeg plotted as a way to try to kind of get Saul back up, kind of attacking David or whatever, or at least keep him in power, it'll kind of end up kind of undermining his pursuit of David and kind of his long-term power. And then meanwhile, the Philistines will end up catching the Hittite kind of right at the end of the episode. But instead of killing him, it'll kind of end on a cliffhanger with them asking him for a favor, which we won't reveal what it is. But I'm thinking that they'll send the Hittite to David's camp, and he'll be the one who they use to invite David to join them, which, eventually that's how David ends up taking up arms with the Philistines in season 2.
I like that.
So thoughts on?
So are we going to make it seem like Saul was about ready to really put the hurt on Dave and everybody? Like if not for the Philistines, it's going to be a victory, a sure victory.
Yeah, like he had enough. He has like enough forces with him, and David's group is like small enough that, David and his men they might take a lot of them with them, but it eventually, like, they're going to get worn down or whatever.
So is the way that the troops are? They're both on like either side of, kind of like they're like as if it was a planet. They're trying to stay away from the other side, like they're trying to stay ahead of them. Is that what how the battle's playing out?
That's how it's kind of described in the biblical one. I added the detail of like there being this canyon so that like initially like Saul's men are like much closer to David's men, but then the rock comes down the canyon, and so then like that gives kind of David and his men like a little bit of a head start to like try to keep away from Saul's men, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
could be kind of neat to where you see it to where it's like we're following just them, and they're at a point where like, well, this is it,
yeah,
we're going to turn around and it's going to be our last stand. It was nice knowing all you guys, and then nothing. Nothing shows up, and we cut to the other guys, and they're like, we find out it's like, what happened to them? Well, we had to run the other way because there was a bigger threat coming. So they could have
that would be a good way to kind of sequence it. Like, we don't find out until until after. Any other thoughts or questions on the episode?
I'm still thinking through it, but are we supposed to see? There's a lot of Benaiah and Jehoiada.
Mm-hmm.
Are we supposed to see there like a contrast between the actions that they take?
Mm. Yeah, so Jehoiada has kind of demonstrated a lack of faithfulness by like leaving David's camp to go kind of after his own personal goal, and it almost kind of creates this, almost messes everything up. Whereas like Benaiah, um, he ends up going with his father kind of out of necessity, but he's kind of driven by a more pure faithfulness to Jonathan, and also like faithfulness to kind of the Lord's anointed and stuff. So like not wanting to. That's why he's like towards the end, like stops David and his men from turning to fight against Saul's forces. So definitely a contrast between them would be good.
I also like that you kind of took two different like Bible stories and like just like kind of, I don't know, like this Benaiah character is not an actual character, and yet like you use this character to kind of draw in two stories in like a creative way. Am I getting that right?
Are you talking
the beginning and the end of the episode with the
to try to kind of create a
yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Oh yeah, and then also the Hittite. So this is the story where I'm trying to create a little bit of a parallel to Uriah's death. So like he's kind of being sent. So when later on when David kills Uriah, he doesn't just like have him executed. They send him into like a really like a bad situation where kind of he's off on his own or whatever, and then they pull back their forces and he's left to die or whatever. And so we've got a little bit of a parallel situation here where Abner is sending the Hittite, not totally alone, but with a few of his men into a really bad situation, and then refusing to provide reinforcements and kind of leaving him out to dry or whatever. So, yeah. Okay, let's press on. Sorry. Last. Let me try.
Froze up on you?
Yeah. It's not advancing. Okay, well, maybe we should we could also just pause here because it's already pretty late. Yeah, do you guys want to take this as a sign?
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to rush through, I guess, another episode necessarily, given how much you put into each of them. So, sorry we didn't get to the third one, but I guess the computer isn't letting us get to the third one.
Yeah, it's okay. Do you guys have any any kind of final thoughts or questions or things you want to discuss before we exit out?
Victor, do you have a thought?
I'm just looking at like the flow of the last 3 episodes. I'm looking ahead more of anything else.
Okay.
Just trying to see.
Yeah. So next episode will be the Nabal, Abigail episode. So where David's men are kind of providing protection, and then Nabal refuses to host them at his party, and David almost like goes and slaughters everybody, and Abigail kind of boldly stops them. So yeah, that'll be next episode. And then as I'm starting to think about episode 9, I think that one, so we've got kind of Jonathan going out to meet David, but I also think that the David's wives will play a large role in that. So we'll kind of have stuff flowing out of episode 8, because we won't actually have David married by the end of the episode. So we'll get into kind of some of the wife situation in episode 9, which will, yeah. And then episode 10 will be the kind of that final attempt by Saul, where once again, David kind of has him and decides to turn him down.
Like these 3 episodes, 6, 7, and 8 kind of make their own little mini arc.
Yeah.
And then we have like not a break, but we're definitely going to a story that takes us through the end of the season.
Yep. Yeah. Jen?
Yeah, this is like a more just kind of general question as we're like this far in the season, and like, yeah, to be clear for those watching, like Kevin's the one who's preparing like these episodes with these outlines. It's and the collaboration is more just like in the discussion, and then sometimes that, I guess, as Kevin incorporates like the different ideas that we come up in conversation into later episodes. So it's collaborative in that sense. But Kevin, yeah, this is something you've made here. What has been the most challenging, like in this exercise of like coming up with these story arcs for each of these episodes, and then for an entire season? Like, what so far has been the most challenging aspect of that you're like, even something that you're like, I'm not sure that I've done this too well? Like, is there something that you kind of have some doubts about, or that's just been like, this has just been really hard?
I think episode 6 was the most challenging because it is like less plot driven. So like some of the stuff that you guys put your fingers on, like there not being a lot of action. Yeah, like that episode I probably have like the least confidence in, even though I kind of like still think that there's room for it, just because sometimes you need like a little bit of a breather episode for the characters to process and stuff. But yeah, doing that episode was a little challenging just because it was like less straightforward. Whereas like some of the episodes where like there's like a lot of like biblical content, or like at least like it's easy to kind of like, you've got a story that kind of fits into an easy like pattern, or like is something that you've kind of seen before or whatever. It's a little bit easier to structure it out. Yeah, so that was for me one of the more challenging things. And then I think like also just like kind of trying to balance between some of the different characters. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think the structure of 6 works pretty good, just because we've had a whole lot of stuff in the first 5 episodes. It's going to be a lot of lore that most people, this will be the first time they're hearing it, and it's a good point to say, okay, where are we? What everything that's happened, what does it mean going forward? What parts do we need to like pay attention to? And focus on for the next step. And in a practical point of view too, you got to have some place where you can save budget.
Yep.
It's like, we're gonna have some big battle scenes. That's gonna cost a lot of money. We need one where it's just people talking, because they do that in every TV series where it's just like the not a lot happens episode.
Yeah, there's actually, isn't there, and again, I haven't watched as much of The Chosen yet. It's in season 2 where I might be remembering
Episode 3.
this wrong. It's like are they basically all in one spot? Like, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, so it's episode
And Jesus
3.
shows up at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first like 20 minutes maybe is like one long take. Like they like loop around and stuff, and it's all yeah, it's still one of the more like interesting
Flashy.
shots from the show. And then they do a couple more take, or like it's not one take for the entire episode, but but it's all pretty confined.
Yeah,
I really like that episode too. So
yeah, there's definitely ways to do it well. I don't think that there needs to be any complaint that there's not enough action, but you definitely want to avoid, I think, I felt this way about one of the Harry Potter books, actually, and I'm not sure, this was just my feeling at the time when I read it. Just one of the books kind of felt like it was a transitional book. Like there wasn't that unifying kind of thing that made it like, oh, this is what this book is about. That might have just been my not getting it.
Book 5 or
it's like book 4, the Triwizard Tournament is like the unifying kind of thing that you can be like, that's the book with the Triwizard Tournament. And then there was another book later after that where it's like, I'm not sure what this is, but there's a lot of things that happen that feel important. And maybe that's okay, but it didn't feel as satisfying. And so in any way that you can take an episode and like, if it is moving chess pieces around and situating things, like there are more or less interesting ways to do that for the viewer. And so I think that's why it was like, oh, there actually might be an interesting way to like, I think we talked about like a parallel between the two different camps that's kind of uncomfy, and that, as you said, Kevin, like might have a lot more to do with the editing, to make that compelling for viewers. So so it doesn't just feel like we're just getting people into place for what's up ahead.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you guys have any like favorite bits of stuff that we've done so far? Either favorite episodes or favorite like
I love all the Hittite stuff. It's just kind of just the way that he, like, especially right here at the end where he's the guy that is going to be the one to deliver the whole joining the Philistine things. That's just a great little nugget that fits with his character and where we are with him, what we're following with him, and just all these little things that just kind of show who he is and who he's going to be, and just adds that tragedy. I feel so bad for him as we go along, and I think that's perfect.
Yeah, that's definitely like one of the character choice. Like, I'm really glad that we included his character. It's been really fun to weave him in.
I'd have to like see the episodes side by side because I can't remember them all, but I definitely like your choice to really highlight at the beginning the slaughtering of the priests at Nob. Like, it's just like, oh gosh, that is like, seems very significant, and I feel like that sets up the season well, with just on a really interesting note. And I'm trying to think. I guess just going back to what I was saying before, it's like, Kevin, this just looks really hard, like to try and you have this whole cast of characters, and not everyone needs to have an equally like deep kind of story or arc, but it's like you do have to keep those things in mind, like things, even just like crafting a whole season and like trying to make sure that there aren't like holes, just even like who knows what and who's where, like I don't know, it's kind of dizzying, which is I guess why you have like writers who work together. So this is like collaborative in some sense, but this is just It's pretty impressive.
It is very impressive.
It is really easy to talk about, but it's not easy to like, I imagine, to like put these slides together. Like, it is pretty nice that we just get to kind of show up and poke holes in them or be like, yeah, that's good. But
well, it's just,
yeah.
it's staying true to the Bible. You know, we're
Mm.
not contradicting anything. We're not, you know, putting out any kind of false message. I mean, all of the story, everything, all the characters fit in with what the record says.
Hmm.
You know, it all works. It all points to the correct result. It's all pointing to Jesus. David is kind of acting like Jesus is in The Chosen. You know, he's a person that should be trusted, not trusted, but you know, he's the one that no one else understands to the level that they should.
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Well,
And just all the puzzle
yeah.
pieces. It's really, I mean, it really is. I'm going to say it again. It really is impressive just how all the puzzle pieces you put together and it fits. Because you know, I've played around with like trying to put TV type show type things together, and it's hard. You know, you have so many
Yeah.
moving pieces, and you're also trying to tie in staying true to the Bible. That is very difficult, and this is a really impressive accomplishment here so far.
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned puzzle pieces, it's kind of like I do a lot of jigsaw puzzles, my wife and I, and like there is, you know, a 1,000-piece puzzle does not just take like, it's not just like doing 10 100-piece puzzles.
Hmm.
Like there's, I don't know what the right term is, but like it gets exponentially more difficult the more pieces you have. And in other words, you could do 10 100-piece puzzles much quicker than you could do one 1,000-piece puzzle. And that's kind of how I feel about like anytime you add like a character, it's like adding, you know,
Like an
yeah, it
order
just
of
makes
magnitude.
the puzzle that much more complex and harder to like put together. Does that make, I don't know if I'm not getting the analogy right on the fly, but it's like, I don't know. And so like, Kevin, have you at any point doubted how many characters you have like to juggle, or does it still feel about right? Because like you take out a character and it just makes it that much easier, but also it means you could be missing more that could be in there. Do you feel pretty good about like the cast of characters that you have?
Yeah, I think I feel pretty good. I think Benaiah, like, he definitely doesn't have like as much of a like arc, but part of that is like a function of how we decided to make him kind of that more pure character, and so like it's kind of okay for him to like, yeah, some of the characters are a little more dynamic than others, but I think that the show would be missing, or would feel a lack if like any of them were missing. So I don't think we could.
Well, Benaiah still has some tough choices to make, even though we know he's going to make the right choices. The choices laid out for him are tough.
Yeah,
he still has to make a tough choice, even though it is the right choice he makes.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the characters seem to be doing something at different points. Like they're there for a reason. Although I don't know if this is like, it's like I don't think Abiathar has showed up that much in these 2 episodes, for example. I don't think, and it's like maybe that's fine. Maybe like certain characters can kind of fade into the background for points, right? Like can some characters kind of have an arc that just kind of like lasts for, you know, a cycle of episodes? Like, oh, really? Like they're, you know, like is that normal, or do they need to like be moving and involved like from beginning to end?
Did you guys watch Rings of Power?
I didn't know.
Because there's whole episodes where we completely skip over entire groups of characters just to focus on a little batch, and it still works, I think.
Yeah,
you
can.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of a necessary element of like, if you've got like several different groups of characters, like you can do some episodes where you can hit all of them, but like if you only do that, it's going to be hard to like kind of progress things forward. And so yeah, I feel like the Rings of Power does a good job of like kind of cycling. So like you always want to kind of have some, the characters
Forward
show up,
momentum.
some in the beginning and some towards the end. So like there's like a season long arc or whatever.
Right.
But there may be a couple of episodes where either they kind of like fade, are like totally not on screen, or they are more like an actor in someone else's story, or they're like kind of one of the other characters is more primary, but they are just showing up in a more supporting role. So
yeah, I don't think we have any kind of a problem like Rings of Power has, but I think it does show that you can minimize a character for an episode, and you're not going to lose their thing, because like what Abiathar is doing is having an effect still on everything that's happening. So his presence is still there, even if he's not physically the one pushing all of that.
Yeah. So like next episode, the Hittite will be won't be on screen, just because we'll be focusing on some of the other characters, and we didn't need to, like, he's kind of in the place that he needs to be until we kind of pick back up with him in a little bit. So yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, thank you guys so much. Like, you guys have have showered a lot of praise and stuff, and I'm grateful for that. But yeah, like even though I've maybe like taken more of like the primary role on the outlining and stuff like that, it has been really helpful just to have your guys's ideas and yeah, just kind of your questions and various different ways that you're kind of feeding off me and bouncing ideas that that have produced different things. Because yeah, like Benaiah, Chad, that character was totally kind of your idea, and I feel like he has been like really an interesting concept. And there might be other characters. Sorry if there's other characters that you guys came up with, but there's definitely been like story ideas or different things that have really added a lot of value. And yeah, I'm just grateful to have this space also to process through my own ideas too, and have you guys provide
This
that
is a lot
space.
like how a writer's room works, where you have your
Yeah.
showrunner, and then you have all the people kind of throwing out ideas. And if we were probably doing this for real, we'd probably each take an episode to write an episode as it goes along. But
yeah. Cool. And well, thanks everybody listening too. Yeah, I'm grateful for the support you guys have given, even if it's just like, yeah, it's nice to when we can see that even a couple of people have been watching and enjoying what we're doing. And always feel free to leave thoughts either in the chat or afterwards in the comments. Would love to incorporate your ideas as well. And also, if you've enjoyed this, if you can like share it with other friends, or at the very least, like the episode, subscribe, all that fun stuff, so that we don't have aspirations of this turning into like a huge thing. But when you have like a larger community, then you can be drawing on like more people's ideas. Would love to have people who have other gifts that we don't have, whether that's like artistically or like even if someone came up with like a song or something that related to the show, we'd love to like incorporate something like that into our discussion. But for now, even just listening is a gift. So thanks for listening, and Godspeed.